Right guys, welcome to another rundown on the lunacy that's going on in the UK. Today we're seeing the slow return of scaremongering from the media, our government's lies being called out, the EU launching vaccine passports, and Andrew Lloyd Webber calling people who refuse the vaccine selfish because vilifying people who pay you £300 a day to sit in the House of Lords is common practice these days, especially when it comes to snivelling shitweasels like Andrew Lloyd Wanker here. So you know what, we're actually going to start off with that little deluded tosspot there. But first I feel I should point out something that I actually mentioned in my video yesterday. That is actually getting a lot more attention today than it did back then. It is in relation to what the government are saying, or should I say government ministers saying, that people who are refusing the vaccine are going to put at risk the 21st of June date. This is of course scapegoating and a way to vilify people into doing what they want. This is obviously bollocks, I don't even need to say it. So let's get back on to Andrew Lloyd Wanker, as I said. Now, it's actually being reported in the Telegraph and a few others how he said to the BBC that those refusing the vaccine are selfish, despite obviously medical treatments being for those they are administered to, not the community, as David Davis rightly put here.
What this proposal does is, in effect, coerce those people. And that's also against a number of international conventions we're signatories to. And indeed, just recently, the Council of Europe passed a resolution saying, 732 said, that ensure that citizens are informed that vaccination is not mandatory and that no one is politically, socially or otherwise pressured to get themselves vaccinated if they do not wish to do so themselves, and ensure that no one is discriminated against for not having been vaccinated due to possible health risks or not wanting to be vaccinated. And this explicitly does that. This explicitly discriminates against people who have not been vaccinated. And we are bound ourselves by both UN and European international agreements to the use of medical treatment. Medical treatment, as it stands, must only be for the benefit of the person it's administered to. Medical treatment must not be administered for, as it were, communal purposes. Otherwise, we'll all be giving mandatory blood transfusions and so on. I give blood anyway, but it will be a requirement.
So no, I would say those refusing anything are not selfish at all. They made a choice for themselves like free-thinking human beings and decided to take a different choice to this tosspot, obviously. There is nothing selfish about it at the end of the day, and it's beyond taking liberties for him to be saying this, considering, like I said, the people pay him £300 a day to sit in the Lords. Now, I should obviously point out that in the same article it states the government has come out against this sort of talk, like I said, after what I was going on about earlier, and indeed what I said in my video yesterday. But obviously you should take all that with a pinch of salt the size of the Dead Sea, because flip-flopping is a common thing with this government, as you know. Also, blaming the public is something they have done themselves in the past year, so the Dead Sea salt might not even be enough of a pinch at the end of the day. But once again, essentially, this is rich cunts telling you what to do, like Shit Rod did here.
I mean, personally, I have to say, I don't even think that we should allow people on the streets unless they've had the vaccine.
Give it a week, Andrew Lloyd Wanker might be calling for the same things as Poundland Rod Stewart was there. Now next up, we have another Telegraph article that are among others reporting on the EU vaccines passport that has literally been given the green light today. These open borders tosspots are now creating medical apartheid when it comes to travelling into the EU. I wonder if the untold thousands of economic migrants that they let in will require these vaccine passports. I expect not, but I could be wrong. Either way, it's both funny and concerning that the EU are doing this. Funny because a year ago they was all for open borders, come and go as you please. Now they are like, show us your papers to enter because you might be a walking biohazard. What a difference a year and 3 months can make, hey? But I will tell you something, it looks like I will never be going to the EU again out of principle, even if they remove this lunacy in the future. Completely fuck them just for doing it. But moving on, we have another Telegraph article here which will actually be the last. I've only included it because it's a quick one and the headline is just flat wrong. It says, what is going on in London shows anti-Semitism is still the only acceptable form of racism in the UK. This, I am sure you know, is complete and utter bollocks. The most virulent form of acceptable racism in this country is directed towards white people at the end of the day. It's fashionable with lefty tosspots to hate on white people after all. The media actually consider it a great thing and promote it whenever they can. So no, I have to say anti-Jewish racism is not the only acceptable one here in the UK. Anti-white racism is far more prevalent and mainstream at this point, often promoted by white soy latte drinking fuckpigs on TV, as you all know. Now next up we have a Guardian article talking about long COVID, post-viral fatigue, or long sick note as I like to call it. It is reporting on a study that is not peer-reviewed at all, but is claiming the vaccine might help with long COVID. This was actually done by a long COVID advocacy group, asking people on social media who said they had long COVID to take part in the survey. In the end, 800 mostly white women took part, which is about as surprising as Boris Johnson being caught lying at this point, which also might explain why it's not been peer-reviewed. To me, alarm bells are ringing in relation to possible bias held by the people involved with this, so salt and the Dead Sea comes to mind once again. Next up though, we have Good Morning Britain, who are actually doing their job, questioning the government's blatant bullshit for once, because they rightly asked the government minister why 4 different excuses have been given for not closing the borders to India, while they scream about the Indian variant going rampant. The host played clips of Boris Johnson, Matt Headcock and Kwasi Kwarteng giving different excuses before George Eustice actually gave his own one on the show. This, I'm sure you're all saying, is something we have pointed out many times before, and so have countless others. If these politicians are talking, the chances are they're talking shit, let's be honest. But I guess well done to Good Morning Britain for actually calling it out when it happens, rather than just covering it up and talking about something completely fucking different. Next up, we have the Labour Party, because why not? They're all a bunch of lunatics at the end of the day, especially when it's John McDonnell and his Corbynite allies planning to force socialism on the UK. It is, of course, if Boris Johnson doesn't do it first. At this point, some would argue we're not far away from socialism as it is. We seem to copy the CCP's policy handbook if the last year is anything to go by. I mean, you could hardly call it a democracy over the last year, could you? But anyway, these idiotic tosspots actually think the reason they keep losing elections is because they need more radical, Corbynated chicken policies. You know, the ones like the 2019 manifesto Diane Abbott promoted the other day and tried to say they were actually popular.
I think it's a strategy problem. When Keir Starmer was first elected as leader, he talked about unifying the party, and he talked about not oversteering away from the policies under Jeremy Corbyn. He needs to go back to that way of thinking. I think sacking Angie Rayner, for instance, is not a unifying thing to do. I think we need to be building on the policies in the 2019 manifesto, many of which were forward-thinking and popular. We need to get the strategy right.
You're talking about going back to the policies or building on the policies from the 2019 manifesto. Some people listening to that might think that is quite a staggering thing to say. You know, that was your worst result since 1935. You lost 59 seats. Isn't that a manifesto that failed?
It was a manifesto that, taking the policies individually, was very popular. There's no doubt that the party leadership came under fantastic media attack, but the actual policies were popular.
The policies might have been popular individually, but as a whole, they weren't popular, were they? They led to your worst defeat since 1935.
They polled well. Of course we had a terrible defeat. You don't need to remind me that it was a terrible defeat. But, you know...
Obviously, this plan is about as batshit crazy as Diane Abbott's claims in that clip, let me tell you. It all hinges on them getting power, which, let's be honest, is never going to happen. Who outside of their small bubble areas would actually elect this merry band of socialist spunk trumpets and deluded tosspots, let's be honest. But guys, as it stands, that's all I have for you on this one. Thanks for watching, especially to the legends who have watched it to the end. Remember, BitChute and Odyssey are linked down below, so check them out if you have not already, and I'll see you all in the next one.